state, because the state of Washington has looked at the FBI and said, oh, you can't be the only ones that are trying to mess with the Catholics. We must get involved with that too, because the state of Washington has just passed a law requiring that Catholic priests actually go through and break the seal of confession if they are informed of abuse. Now, bishops, to their credit, are saying there's absolutely no way that they're going to comply with this. But Chris, I know that the three of us here, we're all Catholics, but can you explain this for some of our non-Catholic viewers so they can understand what's going on here?
Absolutely. The sacrament of confession is one of the seven sacraments, one of the crucial sacraments of the Catholic Church. It's the way that people bring their sins before God and ask for forgiveness and penitence. It's as important as marriage. It's as important as last rites. It's as important to salvation as baptism. It's something that is essential in the spiritual life of Catholics, and it's been for 2,000 years, or one of the most protected parts of the Catholic Church. As one priest who's a frequent confessor told me, it's really essential not to have a very good memory because you hear things, you hear a lot of things, and people have to unburden themselves with some darkness, and they only can do that and have that access to the sacrament if they know that the seal of confession is legit. It's not another therapist's couch where if you talk about these sorts of things, they have duties to law enforcement. It is removed from this world. And it's also a complete and total false herring, a red herring for liberal politicians to be chasing. The problem with the priest abuse scandal and the child abuse scandals of the past was not that they were whispered in confession and not confronted, is that they were known to the higher ups of the church and covered over and papered over. I'm from Boston. I grew up in Boston. We had family friends who killed themselves after the awfulness that they were subjected to by some satanic priests and some people who took advantage of that, people who abused the sacraments, people who were wicked in their heart, and people who were papered over by the cardinal and cardinal law and taken care of and protected from the authorities. It's not a matter of confession. So this is an actual just attack on the church, on the sacraments, and it's a great thing that the bishops are coming up against it. But it also falls into a freedom of religion fight that is crucial to battle back against, and that's why I'm really excited to see that the Federal Department of Justice is now investigating this law for the obvious civil rights violations that it entails.
Yes, Chris, and we should say, I mean, this has been something that has been recognized for a long time in the United States as part of what you don't touch because of that freedom of religion. It's interesting to me that every so often this issue does come up. You see it, you've seen it over the last 20, 30 years. I'm curious your thoughts as to where this is coming from, because this has been recognized for a long time, generally speaking, as something you don't touch, right? But I always suspect the increase, there's increasing pressure on the church on this issue, and it has less and less to do with what these people say, in the front, and more about what they're carting in the back, which is just an anti-religious fervor.
I think that's exactly it. And I was thinking about the same thing, Matthew. The fact that this sort of these sort of laws were pushed in Australia. They were talked about in Massachusetts at the height of the abuse crisis, which, not to date myself, but I was a child during these when they came out. Most of these offenses are from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, not even really from the 90s when it started to be known, not from the 2000s or the 2010s. Forget about the 2020s. There is not a massive call for this. What there is, however, is a massive and increasing anti-Catholic animus across the West. We saw it last year, or a few years ago now. We saw the massive spate of church burnings across Canada done by activists who were burning down the things that have been built by the poor and built by the faithful in the name of somehow freeing them, basically with the tacit and sometimes illicit approval of Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, and the apologies of the Pope, which was a sad moment for everyone. We've seen across the United States, and they don't report on this. They'll report on the attacks on plenty of different religions. Corporate media will report on increasing attacks against Asians or against Hindus or against Jews. But the increase on intentional vandalism and attacks and anti-Catholic attacks on churches is up hundreds and hundreds of percent over the last many years. As a priest who deals a lot with the demonic once told me, unfortunately, it's a very hard job for a priest. It's not as cool as the movies make it seem. He said, the devil is no longer hiding in the shadows. The devil is very much out in the open. You have now U.S. senators, and he was talking about that from his personal experience with dealing with them and dealing with them with trying to free different parishioners from the influence of these things. But you see it in the U.S. Senate. You saw the religious test being reintroduced. You saw people being accused of being parts of extremist groups before they could get a nomination to a judgeship because they were members of the Knights of Columbus, which is a life insurance and volunteer group that helps. We do things like literally set up the tables and the chairs for the bingo and run the Oktoberfest and help raise money around Christmas and do food drives. It's not an extremist organization that's completely insane. And you'd see that said in the halls of power. And you'd see a lot of different people openly saying, as a Catholic, by the way, none of them go to church. At least they don't go on Sunday, every Sunday. Maybe they show up for Christmas and Easter. They're not going to confession. They, by all actual rules, would not be allowed to get married or buried in the Catholic tradition. So, but they claim that they're Catholic, so they're allowed to do this anti-Catholic bigotry and score political points with the anti-religious left. By the way, that's how Governor Shapiro, who is not Catholic, rose to prominence in Pennsylvania, was by not actually solving problems, but by persecuting the church and the faithful for past issues in order to make a name for himself and get more money for the secular state. It's a serious ladder for climbing power in democratic politics, and it's an insidious one.
All right, Bedford, let's end this conversation on a little bit of a lighter note because the NFL draft is coming to Washington, D.C. We're about to get our viewer questions and answers from this. I have to get your take. It's your city. You're our Mr. D.C. guy. What's your rundown here?
Oh, my rundown is I can't wait for you guys to come here and be reporting live. We have an actual sportscaster on the team, which will be phenomenal. I tell you what, I played football for 6 years, but I don't think I've ever watched a single draft. This will have to be the first time that I go down to that beautiful National Mall and check the whole thing out because DC is a beautiful city and it's a wonderful place to highlight these events for all the awfulness that actually goes on here, which is what we talk about most nights. It's a beautiful city, and I really do love, sports was not political at all. Previously, I guess they had the rah-rah patriotism. They got paid by the military for flying jets over. They had some great American flag waving stuff. Barack Obama really politicized sports in a negative way. A lot of people felt that it was okay to talk about it. That's when ESPN went to hell. That's when you could no longer watch a baseball game without some broadcaster pronouncing about how global warming might be affecting the ability to hit home runs, like if it wasn't steroids or something. But Donald Trump being a big part of sports, being a big part of the Indy 500, going to football games has been so wonderful and such a great addition to American sports. And I hope it's bringing it back to just a level of, this is part of civic engagement. This is where we gather after the Boston bombing. This is where we gathered after 9/11. This is where something that brings Americans together. And it should be in a truly patriotic and a beautiful way and not in a political way.
It absolutely should be. And I want to just inform the audience what happened for the last NFL draft, because we were actually back out there in Washington, D.C. And that's when the two of you had guys' night. And yet me, the old broadcaster here, went through, I walked up along the wharf, I grabbed myself some gelato, and I sat back in my hotel room and watched the NFL draft alone. And that is the breakdown that we have here for the way that the mandate is set up.
But to be fair, I mean, the first night of the draft is like, if you're bored, it's kind of fun. But I mean, I'm just curious, like who my team gets, right? Yeah. Which someone's going to update me. I'll look at it. I'll watch the videos later, which I did that night. And that was it. So there's a low-key way to do this.
Yeah, well, it's time to make the Redskins great again.